Last but not least, Section X, offenses against the habitation. Burglary. Not to be confused with burglary. This is burglary. Burglary. At common law, the elements of burglary are a breaking and entry of the dwelling of another in the nighttime with the intent of committing a felony therein. The breaking and entry of a dwelling of another under the cover of the night with the intent to commit a felony therein. Anyone studying first year can't do that needs to quit. Breaking required. Here comes all the exceptions that we now have under the modern jurisdictions. Actual breaking. Minimal force sufficient. Actual breaking requires some use of force to gain entry, but minimal force is sufficient. Opening closed but unlocked door constitutes a breaking. If force is used to enlarge an opening so that entry can be made, the traditional rule was that this does not constitute a breaking. Under the better view, however, a breaking has occurred because force was used to gain entry. Example, D, intending to steal a valuable painting inside V's house, approaches V's door. The door is open about 6 inches. D pushes it fully open and enters. Is D guilty of burglary? The best answer is yes, since force, although only minor force, was used to gain entry. Constructive breaking. Constructive breaking consists of gaining entry by means of fraud, threat, or intimidation, or the use of the chimney. Because that one came out in left field. Okay, fraud, threat, or intimidation, or the use of the chimney. P wants to get into V's apartment to commit a felonious assault on V, but V's door is securely locked. P knocks, and when V asks who is it, P responds, I am a friend of your brother, and he asked me to deliver this message to you. V then unlocks the door and invites P in. P enters. P has never met V's brother. Is P guilty of burglary? Yes, since entry is obtained by fraud. This is constructive breaking. C, requirement of trespass, consent to enter. A breaking requires a trespass so that if the defendant had the consent of the resident to enter, his use of force to gain entry is not a breaking. The existence of consent to enter during limited periods, however, will not prevent entry by force at other times from being a breaking. Moreover, if the consent was procured by fraud or threats, this is a constructive breaking. D, requirement that breaking be of the house. The breaking must be to effect entry into the structure or some separately secured subportion of it. Thus, it is sufficient that the defendant broke to enter a closed closet or walled safe within a dwelling. But it is not enough if he merely breaks upon a box or trunk within the dwelling. Breaking to exit insufficient. The breaking must be to gain entry. It is not burglary to hide in a dwelling with the intent to commit a felony and then break to get out of the dwelling. Entry required. Entry is made by placing any portion of the body inside the structure, even momentarily. Insertion of a tool or inanimate object into the structure is entry if it is inserted for the purpose of accomplishing the felony. It is not sufficient if it is inserted for purposes of gaining entry. Examples. A approached B's dwelling and shot a bullet through his window, intending to kill B. Has A committed a burglary? Hell, yes, he has inserted an inanimate object into the dwelling by breaking for the purpose of committing the felony. 2. Z intends to go into V's house and steal valuable jewels from a safe. He carefully cuts out a small portion of glass from a window and reaches in with his hand to unlock the window. At that point, he is apprehended. Is Z guilty of burglary? Yes, his hand had entered the dwelling. So again, a breaking and entry of the dwelling of another at night with the intent to commit a felony. So yeah, he's still in trouble. Dwelling, used for sleeping purposes. Still, a structure is a dwelling if it is used with regularity for sleeping purposes. A. Used for other purposes. Still a dwelling. A structure remains a dwelling even if it is also used for other purposes such as conducting a business. B. Temporary absence of inhabitants. Still a dwelling. Temporary absence of those dwelling in a structure will not deprive it of its character as a dwelling. It is not a dwelling, however, before anyone has moved in, even if it was built for use as a dwelling, nor does it remain a dwelling after the last dweller has moved out and no intent to return. Of another, occupancy is determinative. The detriment is that the structure be used as a dwelling by someone other than the defendant. Occupancy, rather than ownership, is material. An owner can commit burglary of his own structure if it is rented and used as a dwelling by others. Requirement of nighttime. Burglary could be committed only during the nighttime, defined as that period during which the countenance of a person could not be discerned by natural light. Required intent. Intend to commit a felony at the time of entry. The defendant must have intended to commit a felony. It is not necessary that this be carried out. It is, however, essential that the intent exist at the time of entry. If the intent is formed after entry is completed, burglary is not committed. Modern statutory changes. Modern statutes have modified the common law definition of burglary in a variety of ways that differ among jurisdictions. Some of the most common are as follows. Abandonment of requirement of breaking. In many jurisdictions, it is sufficient that the defendant enter the structure even if he did not break to gain entry. Remaining in a structure. It is often a burglary to remain concealed in a structure with the intent to commit an offense. C. Broadening structures that can be burglarized. The description of structures that can be burglarized is often expanded beyond dwellings and sometimes beyond structures to include yards and cars. Garages, stables, especially if they are adhered to the dwelling. But if they're, say, across the street, that does not constitute a dwelling. Now, elimination of nighttime requirement. The requirement that entry be at nighttime is often abandoned, although burglary at nighttime is often assigned a more severe penalty than other burglaries. Nighttime is often defined by statute in terms of sunset and sunrise. E. Intent to commit misdemeanor theft. The intent necessary is often expanded to make it sufficient that the defendant intended to commit any theft, even if it was a misdemeanor theft. B. Under the offenses against the habitation is arson. By common law, arson consists of the malicious burning of a dwelling of another. Requirement of a burning. A. Necessity of fire. By common law, the required damage, see below, must be caused by fire. Damage caused by an explosion does not constitute arson. Damage required, scorching, insufficient, versus charring, sufficient. Traditionally, destruction of the structure or even significant damage to it is not required. During limited periods, however, no, wrong page. To complete the crime of arson, but mere blackening by smoke or discoloration by heat scorching is not sufficient. There must be some damage to the fiber of the wood or other combustible material. This is generally stated as the rule that mere charring is sufficient. Dwelling. In common law, dwelling was defined for arson as it was for burglary, see above. Most states by statute extend arson to structures other than dwellings. Note, questions on the multi-state exam that are testing on other arson issues, i.e. malice, will often assume without saying that the jurisdiction's arson law applies to structures other than dwellings. Of another, ownership immaterial. Arson, like burglary, is a crime against the habitation. Thus, the structure had to be used as a dwelling by another. Ownership was not material, even if the defendant himself was the owner. Note, at common law, the burning of one's house was the misdemeanor of house burning if other dwellings were nearby. State of mind required, malice. The burning does not have to be with ill will or for any particular motive. no specific intent is required. On the other hand, it is not sufficient that the burning was accidental, even if the defendant was negligent. All that malice requires is that the defendant have acted with the intent or knowledge that the structure would burn, or with reckless disregard of any obvious risk that the structure would burn. Now, related offenses. House burning. A common law misdemeanor of house burning consists of malicious, as defined in arson, burning of one's own dwelling if the structure is situated either in a city or town or so close to other houses as to create danger to them. Arson with intent to defraud and insure. At common law, it was not arson to burn one's own dwelling for purposes of fraudulent collecting the insurance on it, but this is often made an offense by modern statutes. Modern statutory changes. Like statutory changes for burglary, modern arson statutes, including the Model Penal Code, have modified the common law rules, usually to expand potential criminal liability. Most states have expanded the definition of arson to include damage caused by explosion and expanded the types of property that may be destroyed to include commercial structures, cars, trains, etc. Section 11, offenses involving judicial procedure. We have perjury. A misdemeanor at common law, perjury consisted of the willful and corrupt taking of a false oath in regard to material matter in a judicial proceeding. Materiality. Materiality is an element of this offense, which must be alleged in the indictment and proved by the prosecution. The statement is material if it might affect some phase or detail of the trial hearing, declaration, etc. Contradictory statements. If a witness has made two contradictory statements at the same proceeding and admits before the end of the proceeding that one of the statements is false, he cannot be prosecuted for having made the false statement. This is to encourage witnesses to correct any false statements they have made before substantial damage is caused. Civil liability. In litigation brought under 42 U.S.C. United States Code, Section 1983, Civil Rights Act, all witnesses, including police officers, are absolutely immune from civil liability based on their testimony. Example, alleged perjury in judicial proceedings. I'm confused. Why? All witnesses, including police officers, are absolutely immune from civil liability based on their testimony. Okay. So, I say my boss is a jerk on trial. And my boss is like, I'll go to sue you for defamation. No, he's not. Period. Subordination of perjury. A separate offense at common law, subordination of perjury, consists of procuring or inducing another to commit perjury. In some states, this is not part of the perjury statute. Bribery. The common law misdemeanor of bribery consisted of the corrupt payment or receipt of anything of value in return for an official action. Under modern statutes, it can be a felony, and it may be extended to classes of persons who are not public officials, example, athletes. Either the offering of a bribe or the taking of a bribe may constitute the crime. Mutual criminal intent unnecessary. It is not necessary that there be a mutual criminal intent on the part of both the person tendering the bribe and the recipient. Failure to report a bribe. Some statutes also make it a misdemeanor offense to fail to report a bribe. Like, say, the attempt to bribe or the solicitation of bribery. Let me just read subordination of perjury one more time. A separate offense at common law, subordination of perjury, consists of procuring or inducing another to commit perjury. In some states, this is not part of the perjury statute. Well, then what is perjury? Perjury consisted of the willful and corrupt taking of a false oath in regard to a material matter in a judicial proceeding. So perjury can happen at one's own will, or subordination of perjury is when another person induces you to do it, which seems like the only reason why anyone would do it, but that's okay. Of course, people would commit perjury, I guess, to get away with their own crime. Anyhow, never thought about it. Compounding a crime. At common law, the misdemeanor of compounding a crime consisted of entering into an agreement for valuable consideration to not prosecute another for a felony or to conceal the commission of a felony or whereabouts of a felon. Under modern statutes, the definition remains essentially the same, except that it refers to any crime, not only felonies. A few states make it a felony offense. So it has to be paid, right? For valuable consideration, not to prosecute another for a felony or to conceal the commission of a felony or whereabouts of a felon. And misprison of a felony. At common law, the misdemeanor of misprison of a felony consisted of the failure by someone other than a principal or accessory before the fact to disclose or report knowledge of the commission of a felony. Misprision was distinguished from compounding a crime in that no passage of consideration was required for the former. Today, most jurisdictions do not recognize the crime of misprision of a felony. In these jurisdictions, therefore, a person is under no obligation to report a crime. That's the end. No more criminal law outline out of the BARBRI materials. However, we do have some really sweet graphs. I don't know what that graph is because I'm holding it up. Classification of crimes. We have property, habitation, person. That's kind of a stupid graph. Defense, like, he doesn't know if it's a property against a person or property or dwelling. Like, for real. Learn English. Anyway, defense of insanity, intoxication, infancy, and diminished capacity are broken out by their elements and by applicable crimes. So this might be worth studying. If you can see it, it's a table telling you what elements are required for insanity, intoxication, and what crimes it can be used to defend. So that one's actually relevant. Justification defenses here, it's relatively the same thing, except instead of elements and what crimes it defends, we've got deadly or non-deadly force by the justification type, which is awesome. On the other side, we have homicide crimes, and it's a flow chart to help you decide between no homicide liability, murder, involuntary or voluntary manslaughter. So that would be your graph. The rest of the BARBRI outline, just for your knowledge, is not here, but it did consist of some questions, some multiple choice questions, and some sample answers, I guess, to really short essay questions. Maybe. I'm not sure what else is in there. I won't be studying it. But this concludes criminal law. Thanks for watching. Bye.